again. Hosanna, Hosanna to the Lamb that was slain. Hosanna, Hosanna, Jesus died and rose again. Amen. And now we have a guest speaker. Brother Lou is I guess, a founding member of Southside. Is that right, Lou? Well, as far as my arrival time, you may as well have been a founding member. But we're happy to have him here with us this morning. And if you would please give him your undivided attention.
Although I have to laugh because every time I do a Google search on Southside Church of Christ, it comes up as my house. Which that actually was Wayne Harris, because I bought the house from Wayne Harris, who was one of the very founding members. But I just like to say I used to be Randy Clay. So back in the day when we were meeting at Murray Park for 10 years, I was Randy Clay on a part-time basis, and then when it got to be bigger and bigger and bigger, we said, can't do this anymore, it's getting kind of crazy. So that was when we hired this youth pastor from, where was he from? Abilene, Texas, I believe, right? And that was 20, how many years ago, Kathy? 27 years ago. But full-time, I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, clinical social worker. So I've been doing practice for about 40 years, and today I wanted to talk to you about something that hits us all. And I know it's hit some of you here in this congregation hard. It's hit some of my family members hard just in the very recent past. How could God let this happen in my life? None of us likes bad news. And even less, we like really bad news. Today we're going to talk about pain and loss and tragedy. Oh, an uplifting sermon. Thank you, Lou, for doing that. But I thought, I just kind of wanted to share with you some of the things that I've learned after talking with literally thousands of people and getting down into the core of what's going on in our lives. One of the questions I hear people asking all the time is, when they're at the end of their rope, how could a loving God cause this to happen? To me, to my loved one. Or maybe they revise it a little bit. How could a loving God allow this to happen? Which I think is typically much more accurate. A phone call from a doctor, a family member, a boss. You ever gotten one of those? The loss of a child, the loss of a job, a marriage, a 401k, our health. If God is so loving, then why does he let the world be like this? This is the most common argument that I hear from people who are giving up on God. Well, I just can't believe in a God who could fill in the blank, right? I mean, haven't we all seen this and struggled with this ourselves, or especially with somebody that we've loved who's just giving up, going, I'm done. And it's very popular in this day and age to just say, the God stuff, I just can't do that. You know, if God was a loving God, certainly he would have made a better world than this. We've all thought that, haven't we, to ourselves? Think about the last year and what we've all experienced. COVID. Remember these headlines? When all of us were kind of coming out of denial, going, nah, I don't think, and pandemic, I don't even get that. Isn't that some stupid movie that, I refused to watch because they're all about, scaring us to death. And then all of a sudden we realized that it was real, that people were dying, that it was spreading throughout the world. I didn't like it. I don't think you liked it either. Then right in the middle of it, thank you very much, an earthquake. Great. Where were you that morning? I mean, I was in our closet inside of our bedroom when stuff started going like this. I thought it might have been Parkinson's or old age, or I wasn't sure quite what it was, except that my wife was experiencing it right there in front of me at the same time, and we both looked at each other and went, earthquake. How about last year, that election? Turning on the news every night and seeing people over here screaming and yelling about the people who were over here, who were screaming and yelling about the people who were over here. Everyone, we will record things on our DVR, and for a couple of months, it was just kind of an ugly thing after the election was over to watch a show from October that still had the political advertisements in it to take us back and remind us and go, oh my goodness, can you really talk about anybody that badly? And, even locally, it really got to be pretty bad. But as bad as last year was, we also can see back in history things that we knew instantly would jar us down to our core. Where were you on 9/11? We don't even have to put in the year because it's a slogan and icon for us now when those airplanes flew into the Trade Center. Just a horrible day where we knew that things were changing, that something would be different for the rest of our lives, and it was. But if you think that's bad, can you imagine, and most of this generation is gone now, we have a few left, but can you imagine being around on December 7th, 1941? It was a Sunday morning like this, when all of a sudden, that my dad's generation began to hear things. He was at a military college in Missouri, 19 years old, studying to be a pilot, he hoped to be, and all of a sudden we were in the middle of a world war. So you can guess kind of what ended up happening in his life. He ended up flying 66 combat missions in a B-25 over Italy. That day that will live in infamy, a day that everyone knew that their lives changed instantaneously. Can we ever understand these things? Can we ever make sense of them? Can we ever overcome them? I firmly believe that God has given us the ability to figure this out. I hear a lot of people say, I just don't know why. And again, with specifics, we don't know why. One child is claimed and another isn't. Why, 30 people in a nursing home, 15 die and 15 don't. We can't really get that specific. But today I hope to lay out a few things by which you and I can feel more confidence about understanding why the world is the way that it is, why people are the way that it is. I believe that the key to understanding this goes back to the very first story that we were told. We have to turn back now to the book of Genesis. We know that in the garden the fall of man took place. We know that sin entered into the world, and with that, death. But there's another piece of this garden story that I really want to make sure we understand today. In that garden, we were naive little kids running around naked, playing Xbox, riding giraffes, petting lions. That's the way I see it anyway. But along came this offer, an offer that we just couldn't refuse. Inside of each of us is a hunger, an innate desire to grow, to have mastery, and to a point that is not a bad thing. But then there came an offer that we could know, that we could really know. Do you remember what the tree was? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I don't want you today to walk away not understanding the importance of that. It doesn't take away from the fall of man, sin entering into the world, death entering into the world, but I want you to understand this particular component. What if I could be an adult instead of a naked little kid running around playing Xbox all day? What if I could make my own decisions, to grow up, to know what he knows? I'm ready. I can take it. Maybe I misunderstood him about this tree. Because, man, I'd love to know. I don't want to kind of live with blinders on. And with that decision to reach up and take a big old chomp, we opened up a Pandora's box of knowledge, viruses, war, and death. We did it. I don't know about you, but it's part of my DNA. I kind of like being an adult, although there are days when I don't, kind of want to go run around naked in a garden somewhere. But I think we kind of gave up that option. At least, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking as I get older, people really won't know. If they'll just kind of pass it off and go, it's old Lou, he's just kind of lost his mind. So if you find me running around naked in my backyard, just don't think much about it. I like being an adult. I like making my own decisions. What I don't like is all the grief, the stress, the regrets, the deterioration. But what would it be like if we couldn't make these decisions? What would it be like if we could have the knowledge and the information and this power? What would that be like? We just couldn't pass it up. We always wanted it, and now it's ours. But then, with it, came the realization. And soon, that realization of the knowledge led us to realizing that we had unleashed something that we could never put back into the box. The genie was out. Whoa! TMI! Too much information. I can never unsee that. Do I really need to see people being beheaded on the internet? Do I need to open up, watch the news and see a mass shooting every night? Do we really need to understand how dark human nature really is? Well, that's what we got that we weren't counting on. That we unleashed this box of horridness onto the world. I don't think God is going to take that away. And I want you to understand that. I don't think that God is going to make it all unicorns and rainbows. It's really tough out there. I always tell my clients, I'm not going to ever disagree with you that this life is hard. But I'll go to my death before I'm going to believe that it's too hard. Now, you will be tested. All of us will be. Let's look at our teenagers. This is a perfect example. Our teens are dying at higher numbers today than we could have ever possibly imagined. Today, suicide is the second leading cause of death among our teens. But it's also the second leading cause of death with college students. It's the second leading cause of death with 25 to 35-year-olds. And don't get me started on those of us who are 65 and above, because, us elders are really not doing well with all of this. From 2007 to 2018, the suicide rate among our teenagers went up 60%. When Linda and Linda ran Dayspring, this drug rehab that I was supposed to be the director of, but Linda really ran it. So, you remember how bad it was back then? And that was, the late 80s. It was pretty bad. I ended up being invited by Deseret Book, of all things, to write a book about it back in 1987. Poor Linda, I tortured her. She had to listen to I dictated it, kind of off the cuff, right? And poor Linda, volunteered to type it out because she was our receptionist and office manager back then. And I think the stories of those kids, by the way, now who are in their 40s, which just kills me, they were teenagers back then. But we just saw, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. We saw a lot of kids die over those years. And yet, nothing like what's going on today. Well, why? How could a loving God allow that? Why could he let our teenagers, kill themselves at such high numbers? And yet try to talk your teenager into giving up their phone or their iPad or their computers. If you talk to anyone in this field, they will all clearly say to you, the answer really, I don't hear this disputed much. What's the difference between now and 10 years ago? Invariably, the answer is social media. What's the problem with social media? Look at what a church can do with social media. And it really is a great, wonderful, amazing thing. The problem with social media is that there are human beings on the other end. If it wasn't for these messy people, think about how nice church would be if it wasn't for all the messy people. Sorry, then it wouldn't be church. What is it then? Well, it's the feedback. That's really what the problem is with what's going on with our teens. Well, what kind of feedback? Well, you know what it is. It's the cancel culture. It's the things that come back that are so negative. And it's the knowledge of that is what teenagers cannot handle. Too much information. And they're overloaded, so overloaded that the only answer they can think of is to end it all. They want it, they demand it, but we all know as adults that it's more than they can handle.